Thank you for tuning in for today's video on your channel Tutu Sahara ASMR. Today we're gonna read a little bit on the richest man in Babylon, and we're gonna read this chapter, an historical sketch of Babylon. So in the pages of history, there lives no city more glamorous than Babylon. Its very name conjures visions of wealth and splendor. Its treasures of gold and jewels were fabulous. One naturally pictures such a wealthy city as located in the suitable setting of tropical luxury, surrounded by rich natural resources of forests and mines. Such was not the case. It was located beside the Euphrates River in a flat, arid valley. It had no forest, no mines, not even a stone for a building. It was not even located open in natural trade route. The rainfall was insufficient to raise crops. Babylon is an outstanding example of a man's ability to achieve great objectives. Using whatever means are at his disposal, all of the resources supporting this large city where a man developed all of its rich wealth, of which were man-made. Babylon possessed just two natural resources, a fertile soil and water in the river. With one of the greatest engineering accomplishments of this or any other day, Babylonian engineers diverted the water from the river by means of dams and immense irrigation canals. Far out across that arid valley went these canals to pour the life-giving waters over the fertile soil. This ranks among the first engineering feats known to history. Such abundant crops as were the reward of this irrigation system that world had never seen before. Fortunately, during its long existence, Babylon was ruled by successive lines of kings to whom conquest and plunder were but incidental. While it engaged in many wars, most of these were local or defensive against ambitious conquerors from other countries who coveted the fabulous treasures of Babylon. The outstanding rulers of Babylon live in history because of their wisdom, enterprise, and justice. Babylon produced no strutting monarchs who sought to conquer the known world that all nations might pay homage to their egotism. As a city, Babylon exists no more when those energizing human forces that built and maintained the city of thousands of years were withdrawn. It soon became a deserted ruin. The site of the city is in Asia, about 600 miles east of the Suez Canal, just north of the Persian Gulf. The latitude is about 30 degrees above the equator, practically the same as that of Yuma, Arizona. It possessed a climate similar to that of this American city, hot and dry. Today, this valley of the Euphrates, once a populous irrigated farming district, is again a wind-swept, arid waste. Scant grass and desert scrub thrive of existence against the wind-blown sands. Gone are the fertile fields, the mammoth cities, and the long canvas of rich merchandise. Nomad bands of Arabs securing ascent, living by tending small herbs, are the only inhabitants. Such it has has been since about the beginning of the Christian era. Dotting this valley are earthen hills. For centuries, they were considered by travelers to be nothing else. The attention of archaeologists were finally attracted to them because of broken pieces of pottery and brick washed down by the occasional rainstorms. Expeditions financed by European and American museums were sent here to excavate and see what could be found. Picks and shovels soon proved these hills to be ancient cities, city graves they may well be called. Babylon was one of these. Over it for something like 20 centuries. The winds that scattered the desert dust, built originally of brick, all exposed walls had disintegrated and come back to earth once more. Such is Babylon, the wealthy city today, a heap of dirt as long abandoned that no living person even knew its name until it was discovered by carefully removing the refuse of centuries from the streets and the fallen wreckage of its noble temples and palaces. Many scientists consider the civilization of Babylon and other cities in the valley to be the oldest of which there is a defined record. Positive dates have been proved reaching back 8,000 years. An interesting fact in the connection is the means used to determine these dates. Uncovering in the ruins of Babylon were description of an eclipse of the sun. Modern astronomers readily computed the time when such an eclipse visible in Babylon occurred and thus established a known relationship between the calendar and our own. In this way, we have proven that 8,000 years ago the Sumerites who inhabited Babylon were living in walled cities. One can only conjecture for how many centuries previous such cities had existed. Their inhabitants were not mere barbarians living within protecting walls. They were uneducated and enlightened people. So far as written history goes, they were the first engineers, the first astronomers, and the first mathematicians, the first financiers, and the first people to have a written language. Mention has already been made to the irrigation system which transferred the arid valley into an agricultural paradise. The remains of these canals can still be traced, although they are mostly filled with accumulated sand. Some of them were of such size that when empty of water, a dozen horses could be ridden abreast along their bottoms. In size, they compare favorably with the largest canal of Colorado and Utah. In addition to irrigating the valley lands, Babylonian engineering completed another project of similar magnitude by means of an elaborate drainage system. They reclaimed an immense area of swampland at the mouths of the Euphrates and Tigris River and put this also under cultivation. The Greek traveler and historian visited Babylon while it was in the prime and has given us the only known description by an outsider. His writings give a graphic description of the city and some of the unusual customs of its people. He mentions the remarkable fertility of the soil and the bountiful harvest of wheat and barley which they produce. The glory of Babylon has faded, but its wisdom has been preserved for us. For this we are indebted to their form of records. In that distant day, the use of paper had not been invented. Instead, they laboriously engraved their writing upon tables of moist clay. When completed, these were baked and became hard tiles. In size, they were about 6 by 8 inches and an inch in thickness. These clay tables, as they are commonly called, were used much as we use modern forms of writing. Upon them were engraved legends, poetry, history, transcriptions of royal decrees, the loans of the land, titles to property, promissory notes, and even letters which were dispatched by messenger to distant cities. From these clay tables we are permitted an insight into the intimate personal affairs of the people. For example, one tablet evidently from the records of country stockkeeper relays that upon the given date a certain named customer brought in a cow and exchanged it for 7 sacks of wheat, 3 being delivered at the same time and the other 4 to await the customer's pleasure. Safely buried in the wrecked cities, archaeologists have recovered entire libraries of these stable tablets, hundreds of thousands of them. One of the outstanding wonders of Babylon was the immense walls surrounding the city. The ancient ranked them with the Great Pyramid of Egypt as belonging to the 7 wonders of the world. Queen Semiramis is credited with having erected the first walls during the early history of the city. Modern excavators have been unable to find any trace of the original walls, nor is their exact age known from mention made by early writers. It is estimated they were about 50 to 60 feet high, faced on the outer side with burnt brick and further protected by a deeper moat of water. The later and the more famous walls were started about 600 years before the time of Christ by King Nabopolassar. Upon such a gigantic scale did he plan the rebuilding. He did not live to see the work finished. This was left to his son Nebuchadnezzar, whose name is familiar in biblical history. The height and length of these later walls, stagers believe they are reported upon reliable authority to have been about 160 feet height, the equivalent of the height of modern 15-story office building. The total length is estimated as between 9 and 11 miles, so wide as the top that a 6-horse chariot could be driven around them. Of these tremendous structure, little known now remains except portions of the foundations and the moat. In addition to the ravage of the elements, the Arabs completed the destruction by quarrying the brick for building purposes elsewhere. Walls of Babylon marched in turn the victorious armies of almost every conqueror of the age of wars of conquest. A host of kings laid siege to Babylon, but always in vain. Invading armies of that day were not to be considered lightly. Historians speak of such units as 10,000 horsemen, 25,000 chariots, 1,200 regiments of foot soldiers with 1,000 men to the regiment. Often 2 or 3 years of preparation would be required to assemble war materials and depots of food along the proposed line of march. The city of Babylon was organized much like a modern city. There were streets and shops. Peddlers offered their wares through residential districts. Priests officiated in magnificent temples. Within the city was an inner enclosure for the royal palace. The walls about this were said to have been high those about the city. The Babylonians were skilled in the arts. This included sculptures, painting, weaving, gold working, and the manufacture of metal weapons and agriculture implements. Their jewelers created most artistic jewelry. Many samples have been recovered from the graves of its wealthy citizens and are now in exhibition in the leading museums of the world. At a very early period, when the rest of the world was still looking at trees with stone-headed axes, or hunting and fighting with the flint-pointed spears and arrows, the Babylonians were using axes, spears, and arrows with metal heads. The Babylonians were clever financiers and traders. So far as we know, they were the original inventors of money as a means of exchange of promissory notes and written titles to property. Babylonians was never entered by hostile armies until about 540 years before the birth of Christ. Even then, the walls were not captured. The story of the fall of Babylon is most unusual. Cyrus, one of the great conquerors of that period, intended to attack the city and hoped to take its impregnable walls. Advisors of Nabonidus, the king of Babylon, persuaded him to go forth to meet Cyrus and give him battle without waiting for the city to be besieged. In the succeeding defeat to the Babylonian army, it fled away from the city. Cyrus thereupon entered the open gates and took possession without resistance. Thereafter, the power and prestige of the city gradually waned until, in the course of a new 100 years, it was eventually abandoned, deserted, left for the winds and storms to level once again to the desert earth from which its grandeur had originally been built. Babylon had fallen, never to rise again, but to its civilization owes much. The eons of time have crumbled to dust the proud walls of its temples, but the wisdom of Babylon endures. Money is the medium by which earthly success is measured. Money makes possible the enjoyment of the best the earth affords. Money is plentiful for those who understand the simple laws which govern its acquisition. Money is governed today by the same laws which controlled it when prosperous men thronged the streets of Babylon 6,000 years ago. With that, we finished our chapter reading. Thank you very much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe,